I would like to welcome again Dr. Anantakumar. Thank you so much for making time. Just explaining to the audience that the clip that they saw just now, it was not a scene in a cyber cafe, but it's in schools more and more now. But it's not in Malaysia yet, because in Malaysia we're still at the level where is the smartphone good or not? Would the kids being exposed to so many games around them good or not? But you know, you've been to a lot of places around the world. You've been discussed this with the people who should be discussing this, and a lot of stakeholders involved, even at maybe the World Education Forum and stuff like that. I would just, for the beginning, ask your opinion on why is there so much debate on this, when why not just try it, see how it goes, and then just learn from there. If it's good, adopt it. If it's not, then don't do it. But just mentioning gamification in education, it's as if that's a very taboo thing to even to be said. So if you can please enlighten us on that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back. It's an interesting question that you pose. Now, the education system is a very interesting system. It's one of those most resilient systems that we have seen. You know, the system that we have now has actually been around for the last 300 years. It has not really changed. You know, comes back from during the Enlightenment years, and the way universities teach, the way schools are set up, it hasn't really changed. There are a little bit tweaks here and there, but at the end of the day, it's still a very exam-driven, rote learning kind of an approach. There are a few cases where you see experiments in trying to drive what we now call 21st century skills in terms of curiosity-driven, to be an inquiring mind. And the question is always why and how. But that's not very much being encouraged in schools. Now, when you are comfortable with a system, it is a very complex system, and you have put into place mechanisms to drive the system. To try to perturb a very complex system from an administrative perspective, it's going to take a lot of what I would say in a very crude term, guts.
Okay.
It's going to be turning around something that you're very comfortable with, and a lot of people will say why. The reason is that we have been pretty good at producing very good. You look at the rate of science and technology over the last 100, 200 years. It's been amazing what we have been able to do, and say this is a product of the education systems we have. But actually it's not. Actually, the people who have gone on and done this are the people who bunked the education system. Okay. If you look at the people like, I won't go back too long in history, but the ones that most people can resonate with, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Apple and stuff. These are all guys who sort of said, looked at the schooling system and said, this doesn't work for me. It doesn't allow me to be creative, to explore, and then they go and do great things. They push the boundaries. So I think that this false misnomer that the education system has actually worked because we have seen so much progress. It actually has not. And what I'm afraid is that when we go into the 21st century, there are new challenges, let me use that term, challenges that we would face. Not so much on the technology front, but on a front that we have really not paid too much attention. And that is our values in terms of what I would call a humanistic way of looking and educating people.
In that sense, we've debunked that why fix if it's not broken? But you have alluded to the point that maybe we have stumbled onto greatness and not really strategically through our education system. But maybe it's the decision makers, because they know that system well. They are where they are, and it works for them. So how do we beg to differ? Because every second that we're delaying this, we're not really changing much in the world. We are still facing a lot of problems. We're looking at conflicts all around the world. Climate change is a big issue, and there's still debate on that instead of really managing it. So how do we move to the powers that be in the world's global education system that, hey, change must begin, and this is the way to go?
So let's look at the client. And who are the clients? It's the young people. They're going to the schools. Putting aside the whole lifelong education where you don't stop learning when you reach a certain age. Let's just look at our primary schools and our secondary schools and our tertiary institutions. These are our clients. And if you have a survey of the clients, they're not happy with the systems that they have. We just ran a huge survey in India itself where the institute is located. And there's been a lot of feedback which sort of says we are not happy with the system that we are forced in. Primarily from what they learn, also to give them the kind of skills that they need once they get out of school. Two, they just are not happy with the kind of pressures, and you can see that the pressures on the student has increased exponentially over the last few years. So our client base is saying we want change. Let's listen to the client, just like any good business would do. You look at the client.
Okay, Doctor, I have to go for the first break, but once we are back, I want to go towards sustainability, but before then, I want to be a bit more real in raising consciousness on this. Is that for the longest time, a lot of effort is focused on meeting the demand of the market. Universities are geared up. Now R&D are supposed to gear up for the market demand and everything else. But is that the right way to go? Because we know we only have one earth. We have to solve the issues of pluralism, not just for commercialism, but for people to really appreciate one another. Would our education system on the current trajectory that is on now just produce people who can earn and be wealthy, but not people who can really solve the wrongs and the ills of the world? And this is the part where I want to put in, just focusing on engineering, technology, high technology and that, but where's the soul in it? Where's the social sciences and humanities that's supposed to let you also be a poet while you're studying nanotechnology, for example, because then you have more sense in the nanotechnology R&D that you're doing. That we'll discuss after this short break. You are still watching Agenda Awani. I'm still here with Dr. Ananta Kumar Durayapa, and we're talking about gamification of education. We're talking about putting social sciences and humanities back while still pursuing science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Or is that all? Do we need to rethink? And I know a lot of people around the country are very excited, or some are depressed because the results of the placement into the higher learning institutions has just been announced. And still there's a lot of issues. I didn't get what I wanted. My son or my daughters didn't go to where they should be going. So I want to answer this from a different angle, which is, before you can really decide what is suitable, maybe you need to really understand what are the options out there. And this is why I want to bring you in the sense that a lot of focus is now, yes, it's a no-brainer. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We're going to need 20,000 accountants by 2020. We're going to have automotive engineers, maybe 5,000 if Proton goes up. And while that is fine and good, but I feel that there must also be corresponding movement and progress. If you only have engineers but not creative designers for the national car company, then how would that car not only be efficient, but it will be palatable to a lot of consumers? So how do we marry this, Doctor? We've been talking about this for quite a long time, off and on the camera, but how do we weave this in? Like at the World Education Forum, even at World Economic Forum or World Islamic Economic Forum, all this gathering of minds, they must reconcile this for us to move forward. That's my personal view of this. What are your views?
So you've asked a very complex question, and with the time that we have, I can go on for days on this. But let me try to. I think in terms of looking at the way our education system, one of the problems is that it teaches a very disciplinary approach. Yeah, you go into maths, you're going to be doing maths. If you're going to do bio, you're doing biology and medical and stuff. So it uses only what Howard Gardner at Harvard had talked about, and it was kind of revolutionary in what he had written, is talk about multiple intelligences. And the only two intelligences that we recognize right now is the literacy and then the logic and mathematics. But there are, I think he's got at least 6 others, and then in his follow-up book is identified a few more that worth exploring. The one which is right from the initial 8 is the intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligence. This is the whole notion of empathy, understanding of another person. I always like what John Rawls, the very famous philosopher, he talks about always when you look at a situation to use the veil of ignorance in a way you sort of say, if I do not know how the future is going to evolve, what kind of a system would I like to set up and usually people will say, hey, in case I get caught in the bottom rung of the ladder, I want to make sure that these things are. So it creates this humanistic education. And one of the exciting things that came out of the recent World Education Forum in Incheon is a document called Rethinking Education. And they emphasize 2 points. One is education for sustainable development, because I think the notion of sustainable, and you sort of said you wanted to have a chat about it, sustainable development is going to be critical because we are on a planet of 6 billion people. It's a finite planet, and people don't seem to recognize that. It's a finite planet. So you take a simple thing, a cake. That's the cake. So if you have 10 people, you're going to have 10 pieces. You got 20 people, you're going to have 20 pieces. Or if somebody takes a bigger piece, somebody else less. So that's, you get all the growing inequalities that we see in this world. So the notion of addressing this multiple intelligence, which means when somebody goes and studies to be a doctor, he will also have within his curriculum embedded, not as a separate class. This has not worked before, where you have a separate class on civics or you have a separate class on citizenship. It does not work. It has to be embedded within the mainstream so that when a doctor comes out, when he qualifies, he understands the whole notion of empathy, the notion of understanding the things that I've talked about earlier on. So that's on the humanistic side. That's critical, and that has to be built. But we also need to inbuild into our students to ask the question why and how, rather than taking for granted what the teacher says. So even at MGIEP, at the Institute, we call it MGIEP in short, is that we want to sort of, we don't use the word teachers anymore. We call them learning facilitators. Because remember, we have so much knowledge out there. So as a teacher is teaching, people are they're checking on the internet, and in many cases they sort of say, hey, you got a mistake here. So there's an overload of information. So I think one of the challenges for our new education system is to teach children how to use this information, how to gather the information, how do you make sure that this information is the right information. So we have been told in many cases of pushing value system education. I've kind of pushed back and I said, no, we're not going to tell them what values are. What we want to teach them is how do they determine their value systems so that there is no imposition of a value system.
Isn't the best way to do that is to let them do things the way they want it to be, but if it's proven to be wrong, then they do it again. I guess that's the whole point about Minecraft and gamification, because inside the Minecraft world, if you don't know Minecraft, you can just Google it. You know, it's like a sandbox kind of game where you build stuff, but if you build it wrongly, you can rebuild it. But maybe in the current education system, the one that we have right now, we don't really allow that. You know, I remember a very critical 17-year-old asking me just a few weeks ago. The question is Malaysia still being colonized? Then she answered, yes, it's about mental colonization, it's about economic colonization. Then she told me that the teacher said, that's wrong. It's not in the scheme of answers. So that is wrong. So the frustration is not about that teacher and that student, but to me what's more important, the frustration at this 17-year-old, because she thinks that she has reached a level where this is how she sees the world, but just to be swiped off that her answers don't matter, this is what is wrong. So games and gamification would allow for the self-exploration of their abilities.
No, you hit it right on the the nail on the head. One of the things that we found with games is that it allows failure. So you don't have the stigma of failing. You sort of say, when you play games, you get hit back, you try again, you change strategies, and you learn. And two very prominent researchers. One is Jessica Belinsky and the other one is Jeremy Richmond. One is a leading game developer, but with a PhD, I think, in education. And the other one is a neuroscientist. And what they have found is that when you play games, it produces dopamine. And you know what dopamine is, or excitement. Now, can you imagine teaching mathematics, and while the kid's playing a game while he's learning mathematics, his dopamine levels increase. This is excitement.
Doctor, I totally agree with you. I feel like going and applying a job at Mahatma Gandhi, because I want to be at these places where there's a game developer, there's a neuroscientist, things will happen. But that's not happening to the larger world. So we have to go to the last break. But once we are back, how do we move this? If we can't change wholesale, why can't we change and do it at a very micro level, but that will be the spearhead that will start the cascading domino effect? We have to do something. We have to do it urgently, because the ills of the world, we know them already, but what do we do about them? How do we move? We'll discuss that after the short break. I'm already having a discussion with Dr. Anantagoma, but there's a lot of challenges. But taking the dopamine-inducing games, maybe it's because every time we look at the younger generation, you're doing nothing much. Just lying there on bed and playing this mobile device of your favorite game. And my perception is you're not doing much. But to that particular young person, his mind is talking to other players around the world massively. Network can link games competitively. At the same time, the adrenaline is rushing. The satisfaction that he gets by finally breaking that hurdle or defeating the team that have never been defeated before, then his body chemically produces dopamine. So adrenaline, dopamine, and the old preaching voice of guardian, mother, father, whatever it is, or whoever it is, let alone a scene at a public school. The scene I just described might be a scene in a house, and that's easier to change, control, or modify. But 10,000 over schools in Malaysia, inequality of resources, infrastructure, inequality of the skills of the administrators and experiences. So, Doctor, what's the best way? When you go to World Education Forum, when you're at MGIEP, everywhere you are in the world, what are the solutions being really looked at and implemented all around the world on this?
So, in education, we have three forms of interventions, policy-wise. So you have the formal system, which means that's through the Ministry of Education, your schools, public schools and stuff. Then you have the non-formal, which is your private institutions. You can call them mocks, even some of that non-formal. Yes. And then you have the informal, which is where the games fall in if they're not been integrated into a curriculum. As a UNESCO institute, we will have to address all three. because one is, as a UNESCO institute, we are a tool for the member states. That's the 193. So we do work with national commissions, which are in a majority of cases situated within the Ministry of Education. So that's an entry point. But as you just alluded, it's a system which is kind of steeped in inertia. It takes a long time. It's policies, and even if there is some movement towards that, it takes a long time to change policies and stuff. But we do address that. And instead of going directly with games, we've kind of just launched what we call the Libra program.
Okay.
It's learning through issue-based, reverse embedding, what we call it. So what, in a very quick way, it is that, let's say you mentioned climate change.
Yeah.
So we take climate change. What is climate change? Well, to understand climate change, you need some understanding of physics, some understanding of chemistry. So you link it up to the chemistry module. So then you sort of say, what I'm learning in chemistry is so useful to this. And then if you want to learn how about climate, the dynamics, mathematics. I, for the first time, after I think about 18 years of learning calculus, realized why calculus is so beautiful. When you learn, how it's in climate change and stuff. So that would be the formal. But the informal is the easiest one with the games, because these kids are going to be playing games. But rather than let them playing, Halo is good in a sense, okay, it's a very violent game, it's shooting and stuff. But what you can do, take advantage of the fact that kids are going to play games. So there was one which was just produced, which is a brilliant game, War of Minds. And it kind of reverses the whole Halo effect. And in what it says is you are put into the situation of somebody who has to survive a day in a war-torn zone. And then you understand why war is so nasty.
Doctor, I want to wrap this up by maybe taking the low-hanging fruits, but also linking it to the future. Because to me, rather than, the wrong way to do this would be, yes, I agree to gamify, so let's gamify chemistry, physics, biology, whatever else, mathematics. But why can't it be like as simple as Candy Crush? Because it's progressive, but from one tree, the branches will be the different subjects and experiences, but they are not introduced because you have to learn mathematics. You need mathematics to progress to the next level because it will unravel and unlock the problem that you're having. I guess from now, a group of people must sit down, because it not only will change the world, it is also not distant from maybe commercial interest. You will have to come back. I want to delve into that further. Thank you so much, Dr. Ananta Kumar Durayapa. Thank you so much to you. Terima kasih banyak. Antarkan pandangan anda sendiri tentang topik pendidikan ini memang sebegitu penting, dan semua Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Sarawak ini bersedia untuk ini, ataupun muat turun aplikasi Mudah Alih iOS dan Android supaya anda boleh menonton dan juga memberi komen secara langsung di gadget Mudah Alih kegemaran anda. Sekian, selamat malam, terima kasih, jumpa lagi.
Thank you very much.